Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, Principal Atmospheric Scientist at Nutrient Ag Solutions, and I want to thank you for watching this weekly Ag Weather Update brought to you by the Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina. Well, there's no doubt about it that 2020 has really started off with a bang when it comes to severe weather. This is each of the severe weather reports put into the Storm Prediction Center since January 1st, and you can see that parts of the south, southeast, up the mid-Atlantic have been very busy. We are well above average in terms of tornado reports as well as severe wind reports. About the only category that we're still behind average on is hail, but that certainly didn't stop some of the big storms that went through parts of the Carolinas, specifically North Carolina, back on the 25th. I'll show you those in just a few seconds. But to show you how active of a year it has been in terms of severe weather, I want to show you this really cool set of data here that was released by NOAA, but through Steve Bowen. There's his Twitter handle. You can see there on the left-hand side of the image. We're looking at two distinct time periods over which we've observed tornadoes in the month of April. And this is the, I'll just draw a line through it. This is the pre-Doppler era, and this is the post-Doppler era. So we're talking about radar here. There's a couple of very neat things to be able to see here. One, of course, with the advent of Doppler radar and the increase of population, we're seeing a lot more tornadoes. They're basically just easier to find with radar, and we have more people there to witness them. But if you look right here in 1954, there was a pretty sizable jump, such that we went from much fewer numbers before that than to much higher numbers after that. And that was because in 1954, on April 3rd, we had the very first ever hook echo detected on radar. Pretty cool event when it comes to the history of meteorology. Now before that, you can see the numbers trailing off there, and then before that we don't have accurate statistics. But my point in showing you this is that right now, April 2020 is currently sitting at somewhere around 200 tornado reports, and those numbers have continued to go up as we've done a lot of damage surveys as of late, making this one of the more elite years in terms of high tornado count, extremely active. Now, our problem over the weekend, especially going back to the 25th, was not necessarily rotating storms producing tornadoes, but as I said a few moments ago, storms that were producing hail. I want to take you to Grover, which is in the county of Cleveland, which is just to the west of Charlotte here, and you can see in this supercell right here the hail core that was sitting over Grover, and we got some reports there of 2-inch diameter hail, which will do an enormous amount of damage. So about the only place over the weekend that had severe weather like this was North and South Carolina, specifically North Carolina, with severe storms both on the 25th and on the 26th. And you can see the heavy rain bands that came with some of those storms here, but other than that, over the rest of the weekend, we just watched a large low pressure system that went and spun right through the center part of the Corn Belt and is this morning racing on off to the north and east. And I want to put all of this into the context of the bigger picture of agriculture across the United States with this map. And I'm going to encourage you to pause it right here, because what you're looking at is the difference in total accumulated precipitation for a time period, March 1st through April 25th. But what I did here was I took that time period in 2019 and subtracted from it the same time period in 2020. So basically, when you look at this, where it is blue, we were wetter in 2019 by inches. You can see it over there on the on the color bar on the right. Where it was red, we were wetter in 2020. And so this is a very unique map to show you the differences between the last two springs. Pause it and take a closer look at it. What I want to do is I want to show you what this has done recently. So the map you're looking at here looks at calculated soil moisture change since March 31st. Now with the heavy precipitation, you can see it in the reds down there in Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina. We've made major changes here in the soil moisture. Now this has helped relieve some drought pressure that's been in parts of southern Georgia getting down into Florida, but it's also come at a time when they're trying to plant a lot of cotton. We've helped relieve the drought down in southern Texas. We've actually seen a 3-class improvement in the drought monitor in southern Texas here, but again, during an active planting time. And out west in California, major improvement in their drought situation. But for those corn and soybean farmers in North Carolina, look at the midsection of the country. Over the last 25 days or so, the midsection of the country has actually had some decent drying days. In fact, windows are going to be opening up for the rapid planting of corn and soybeans in the midsection of the United States in the days to come. So that is something to be considering here, given that even with the heavy rain over the weekend, in fact, near Peoria, Illinois, right in through that little oval I drew there, that whole area saw between 2 and 3.5 inches of rainfall. Yet But on Sunday, skies cleared, winds picked up, and things dried out relatively quickly. That's because, well, unlike a year ago, that area is not nearly as wet as it was. So I want to give you that broader scale perspective on things. Well, throughout this morning, today, we had this large low pressure system exit the northeast. And while it did bring in some cloud cover through North Carolina, what it did was it kept some morning temperatures relatively cool. And by the way, this storm system was producing some snow in the interior of the northeast. Another thing just to think about in terms of the rest of the ag belt is what happened right over here in the eastern part of the Corn Belt, specifically parts of Michigan and Indiana, where overnight low temperatures did dip down to that freezing mark. So we had a very, very late frost in parts of Indiana and Michigan, which is very uncharacteristic for this time of year. But the main show for the rest of this week is going to be the system that's pushing into the western part of the United States. So we better dig right into this and see what we're talking about. I want you to watch that wave I've identified there with the arrow, because this is what the upper level flow looks like today as we work our way into tomorrow. Look at the changes that we're going to be seeing here. Do you see how the jet streams are becoming a bit more bunched up? That trough is getting much deeper into this area, such that going from tomorrow on Tuesday into Wednesday, things look like this. Now, the reason why I stress this to you is because the flow becomes more meridional. That's where the jet stream has much more curvature to the north and south versus being more zonal, which is west to east. So that by Wednesday, the main trough axis extends basically through Wisconsin and Illinois. And then watch this, because of that meridional flow, by Thursday, that trough is now sitting here over like Lake Huron over to the Appalachian Mountains. And basically, the more the flow runs north and south like this, the slower the progression from east to west. And why I bring this up is because this is what's really going to be keeping the wetter weather away from the Carolinas for a few days this week. Our severe weather threat does stay, thankfully, away from the Carolinas, with the exception of maybe on the 29th. That would be Wednesday. We could get some stronger storms over in this area, but I'll show you that in a few moments. Do know that the midsection of the country in the day on Tuesday, which is the map that's in the upper right-hand corner, does have the risk for some strong to severe storms. So let's just kind of play this forward to see when this precipitation will finally get here, because this is going to animate things out for us all the way until Wednesday morning. And if you kind of noticed, there wasn't a whole lot to be talking about for North Carolina. In fact, we just had the widely scattered showers last night that moved out of the state, and then just this morning, the scattered cloud cover. Maybe some showers in the northeastern corner through early morning. But other than that, things are looking pretty quiet throughout the day on Monday. As we work our way into the overnight hours on Monday night into Tuesday morning, maybe some scattered showers moving over the Appalachian Mountains. But just notice, getting into Tuesday morning, afternoon, and evening, things are relatively dry. And then as we work our way out into Wednesday, we do see what is to the west of us. But notice it took 3 days for that system just to get into the eastern Corn Belt. So we got to switch over to the European model to see when this finally gets here. So let's click play and let it run through Wednesday morning, which is to this point. Wednesday afternoon and evening, not too much to talk about. But as we get over toward early morning Thursday, that is when that low pressure system finally wraps up enough in Michigan that the main frontal boundary to the south pulls across the state of North Carolina. And as it does so, chances for some heavier rain again in the overnight hours on Wednesday into early Thursday morning. And that frontal boundary pushes through by Wednesday afternoon and evening. And as it leaves, a little bit of cooler air does come in behind this. But that really, for this week, is our only chance at seeing some rainfall. Now, I cannot rule out that some of these storms might briefly put down some very heavy rain and the threat for some strong local winds, but I don't see much other than that, okay? So let's work our way into Friday morning, Friday afternoon and evening, into Saturday morning. High pressure dominates for your weekend. Temperatures are going to rebound, and gosh, you have another decent stretch of drier days. Now, week 2 is showing up maybe a little bit on the wetter side of things. I'm going to explain to you why we're seeing that in just a few moments. But if we pull this out all the way through the next 5 days and just look at total accumulated precipitation, it's that one shot coming in here later on this week that adds everything to the map that you see here. So if you're missed by some of these showers and thunderstorms, then you're going to get nothing out of this. But some locally heavier amounts are certainly possible out of the system that pulls through later on this week, okay? Week 2, jet stream gets itself bunched up like this. Now, with the deeper trough that's anchored to some colder air stretching between the Hudson Bay, the northeastern part of the United States, and the Great Lakes, we do have the cooler bias going into week 2. And also, we will watch for systems to come over the edge of that ridge that's parked out west here, and then the subtropical jet helping things out, possibly keeping us a little bit on the wetter side of things. But there's not much strength or agreement in this forecast. So the GFS ensemble is on the left, the European ensemble is on the right. You're looking at precipitation anomalies or differences from normal into week 2. And you can certainly see that both models do want to keep a wetter corridor there and also in through here, and it kind of comes together in parts of the mid-Atlantic. So it's just to say that week 2, which would really be the 2nd through the 9th or 10th, isn't necessarily showing up on the drier side of things. That's my main illustration by looking at this. Now watch these temperatures. Certainly today we do have the cooler air behind the system that is leaving, so we're expecting some high temperatures today to get up around 70 degrees across much of the state, with some cooler weather as you go north and back over toward the higher elevation. But as we go from Monday into Tuesday, the rebound in temperatures happens much more climatologically normal here with mid-70s. As we work our way into Wednesday, ahead of the next system, we got a nice warm up there. See temperatures getting up into the middle to upper 70s. But as the cooler and wetter weather moves through, look at that. That's Thursday. The colors tell you departure from normal and the numbers tell you the high. So let's go from Thursday, but look, rebound happens pretty quickly for Friday, getting into the weekend. That's Saturday and Sunday. So it's a weekend warm-up after a drop-off midweek with the rain that comes in on the day on Thursday. Okay, broader picture. When we look out today 6 through 10, though, remember this is when the jet stream was favoring that pattern. We can see it pretty clearly in the European model is trying to hang on to near average to slightly cooler than average weather overall. And this tends to extend pretty far out here into day 11 through 15. Now I will make one comment. I do believe that the European model is biasing this a bit too cold, and I'm going to favor the GFS's more moderate temperatures during that time period, maybe only being 2 to 4 degrees cooler than average rather than as high as 8 to 10, which is what the European is saying. And here's my reasoning for this. Right now, we've noticed that in the latest forecast of the MJO, they're forecasting it to get into phase 4, and if it comes out of phase 4 over into 5, 6, and 7 like this, well, these are certainly the warm phases for the eastern half of North America. And you can see that the forecast from the the European model is also trying to bring it back into this territory. At that same time, look over the Hofmüller diagram on the right-hand side. See those red colors? That indicates that coming off of Australia, we have some stronger westerly winds that'll be meeting in blue here some stronger easterly winds. The air is going to converge just to the west of the international date line, which has a tendency to then rise, move to the north, and flatten out our jet stream pattern. That seems to coincide here with the same time that the global wind oscillation reaches a peak and then starts to come back down. So my story here is that in the longer term, the chances of this being as cold as the model is suggesting, I think, are relatively low. I'm not saying it's going to be hot, I just don't think it's going to be that highly amplified of a pattern at that point. And again, we're looking out here into the month of May. Now here's something else I want to consider. Because of those changes, we now can see that as we move from today on the 27th toward May 11th, that over the Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico, the Western Atlantic in this area, do you see these cooler colors showing up here? This is where the upper levels of the atmosphere, on a parameter that we call velocity potential, is showing, well, in this color, easily exhaustible air as it rises. Now, what does that mean? Well, we want to make it, well, if you want rain, you want storms, you want hurricanes, you need to make the upper levels of the atmosphere in a configuration that allows for upper air rising motion. The air can exhaust aloft. So all hurricane season long, we're going to start looking at these maps. My point behind telling you this is that the pattern through mid-May is easing up over this area, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see some subtropical development in this region, which may resemble, some hurricane-like circulation. Now, not hurricane-strength winds, no, but just rotation out in the ocean. And it is certainly being spurred along by the very warm ocean temperatures in the western part of the Atlantic. In fact, take a a closer look here. I showed you this before, but these ocean temperatures here in and around the Caribbean, Western Atlantic, and Gulf of Mexico are averaging 1 to, in some locations, over 2.5 degrees above average, and that's in Celsius. So this is some pretty warm water for this time of year. As we look out, I want to remind you of one thing. Going farther out toward the end of this summer, August, September, October, see the cooler water emerging here? Several of our models are indicating some stronger trade winds, which would indicate the development of weak La Nina conditions. And if there are weak La Nina conditions, well, inside the area I'm hatching right now, we tend to have lower wind shear values. Combine it with the warm ocean temperatures. Just want to put a reminder in your ear here that we are thinking that the upcoming hurricane season has a better chance than not at being more active than normal based upon these parameters. So keep that in mind. But coming back to now, when we look out from May 8th through June 8th, the longer range European model, while it's favoring warmth out west, isn't really picking up on any sort of a major bias in that whole circle I just put there, which of course includes the Carolinas in terms of temperature. But do notice the models have been very, very consistent with trying to keep much of the Corn Belt, the Cotton Belt, getting over to, the Piedmont, getting over to the Mid-Atlantic on the wetter side of things. It's been a very consistent signal. Now, it's not calling for major flooding, but it's just keeping things on the wetter side of things, which means I don't anticipate the drought monitor here showing up with drought as we work our way into the end of spring and the beginning of summer here. So we are drought free, and I anticipate us staying that way for at least the next 45 days. To wrap this up, I want to give you a quick international view of things, and we're going to go straight to South America. So when we think about South America's growing areas, there's a lot of second season or safrinha cotton and corn grown inside that oval, and some of it's down here in parts of Mato Grosso do Sul, getting toward Paraná and Rio Grande do Sul, where soil moisture anomalies are showing up quite low right now. And when we look on satellite, the vegetation health index in Rio Grande do Sul looks bad. So this is not good for full season corn, soybeans, and some other safrinha crop we grow down there. Again, where we grow that safrinha crop is highlighted here in this map from the USDA, just so you can kind of see the regions we're talking about. As we move forward in the forecast, much of Brazil's growing area is showing up dry with very heavy rains in Argentina, which is hampering the harvest effort there, which up to this point was running about 10% above average. So this is going to slow them down. But looking into week 2, much of Brazil's growing area does show near average precipitation. But remember, as we get into the month of May, the monsoon is shutting down, which means to be normal precipitation is relatively light amounts. Okay? Finally, just want to give you another update about Europe. A couple weeks ago, I showed you how there was very dry conditions in part of Europe. We can see the effect of that. Notice all these colors that are kind of shown up there in those warmer colors, or the tan, I think it is. That's where the vegetation health, as viewed from satellite, looks worse than it did a year ago. But notice that over the next 15 days, the European model is actually painting much of Europe all the way over to Ukraine and the Russian wheat belt as wetter than normal. So let's keep an eye on this all together, on these global weather pressures, and I look forward to talking to you again next week. And until then, have a good one. Thank you.